Hi everyone, thank you for joining in. We'll just wait for a couple of minutes so that everyone joins and then we'll take it from there. Also, we have like around 120 people who joined us on the Zoom call. So I think we should start and I'm sure more people will join as we progress. So, so first of all, hello and welcome everyone and welcome to another book discussion today by Loctopus Law School Book Club. Today we have a very special guest with us, Ms. Sunetra Choudhury. She is a longtime journalist, an anchor and an author. She was earlier with the NDTV and presently she is the national political editor at the Hindustan Times. She is also the author of 3 books, Breaking News, Behind Bars, and Black Warrant. For the past like 1.5 months, we've been reading 2 of her books, Behind Bars and Black Warrant, as part of a book club. And then we reached out to Sunetra, and she was very kind to come and speak about like the books to us. So thank you so much for taking out the time. And we realize it's a very busy day, and you've still taken out time to come and speak to us. So thank you so much for that, Sunetra.
Thank you, Monk, for having me. I've always felt that lawyers have been great resources for me. For both my books, I really relied on this network of lawyers that I've got to know through my career. When I started on the crime beat, but I was only on it for a couple of months because my editor felt that, crime was something that someone who's a little more experienced could cover. And so I only spent a couple of months, but the writing always fascinated me about crime because, the usual kind of ingredients that you need, which is that, there should be a hook. It should have people hooked to it. And then all of that was in crime journalism. And then at some point of time, I covered, and I think it was 2000. I was also quite new, but a little more experienced than being a complete fresher. So I had about a year's experience. I started covering Delhi High Court. And I met a lot of lawyers now who are, a lot of them are senior advocates right now. So those friendships stayed. And I like the fact that, I love covering politicians, but it's really nice to also have lawyer contacts because you learn things, right? And I love the fact, even yesterday I was talking to someone, and I love the fact that when you read an order, you get a full sense of a story. You get everyone's perspective. So I rely on that a lot. So my lawyer friends are a great resource for both my books. So I'm of course really grateful and happy that you all read it, and I'm looking forward to this.
Well, thank you for saying that, Sunitra. I think that flows both ways because, like in the book club, also we have people who are practicing, who are studying law. But the kind of stories which came out like surprised everyone. For example, like I have studied law for 5 years. We've had subjects on like criminal law and all. But the kind of stories which came out like through your book and the kind of experiences which like we could read about were like very fascinating, and it made us also like think a lot about like what we study and how that's applied. So yeah, so very excited to discuss like both these books. And for people who are joining us, also to just give a very brief idea about these books. So Behind Bars tells the tales about like the rich and powerful and also some ordinary people and how they have spent their lives in jail. Whereas in Black Warrant, like Sunetra ma'am tells the story of a Tihar jailer who's been at the jail for 35 years, who's also been like a press officer, a legal officer there, Mr. Sunil Gupta. And one of the very fascinating things about both these books is how like she ties the social aspect and the human aspect to the legal aspect, which is something we feel is like a lot of times missing from law. So that, and like both these books are very accessible. So if you're somebody who doesn't have a background in law, who has not read these books, then like we definitely recommend you to like pick these books up. You'll surely like have a great time reading them. And for people also who are on the Zoom call, you can use the Q&A box and we'll take questions at the end and or as and when they come along. So so let's get started with the questions. The first question, and that ties into the thing you were talking about, is like how this idea of writing about law also like fascinates you a lot because there's a hook, there's like so many perspectives involved. So one thing which we were wondering is like first you wrote Behind Bars, which came out in 2017, where like you're writing as a first person narrative where you conducted the research. But in the second book, Black Warrant, you are writing like Mr. Sunil Gupta's voice. So how was the perspective like different in both the books? Like how was the writing process different? How do you temper like somebody else's voice while also like having your own touch to it? So can you tell us how the journey of like both these books were and how different they were?
That's such a good question. Because, for me, it was a huge problem. And of course, I'm going by the fact that all of you know both books, so I don't need to explain the context. So, see, it wasn't like the reason why my first book was in 2010, right? And that had nothing to do with these topics. I mean, it wouldn't interest all of you. It was a fun book. It was about journalism. It was about travel, breaking news. So for me, the whole idea of writing books didn't come like, I had to become an author. There was nothing like that. It was just a natural progression from doing my work, which is telling stories, right? So what happened was, and just like my first book was, that I went on a journey for 2 months on the bus. And when I came back and I had done my work, I'd been on TV, I'd done my work, but even then there was so much inside me that I couldn't sleep. Literally, I couldn't sleep till I put it down on paper, you know? And that's I think that's, if any of you want to write, and if you're thinking, should I write a book? If the idea is so good that, you have to share it with the world, otherwise you lose your sleep. That was the reason for my first book. That was the reason for my second book. But I'll tell you why the third book was different. So anyway, so the second book, which is Behind Bars, I just met someone who called me out of the blue, and she'd just come out of jail. And if you have read the book, you know that it's Anka Verma, who is the model. So she comes out of jail and she gives me a call. And because she gave me a call and because what she said, and you have to remember this is in 2016. And by 2016, I've already spent 17 years in journalism. Now, as a 17-year-old, so by 17 years, you know that obviously that's a pretty experienced journalist. So if with 17 years of experience, I'm listening to this woman's stories and I'm thinking, my God, where does this happen? Like, how can this be? And I'm a journalist. I'm supposed to be jaded. Like, I've heard it all before. I've done it all before. But if you hear a story which makes you think like, no, that's insane, it cannot be, then, it's so anyway. So I did that story for NDTV because I was working there. But it didn't tell the whole story. Like, it was a half an hour show and it was like, because she wasn't opening up on TV that much. Then I tried writing about it. It still didn't happen. And that, I think, at that time, I was, it was, as I was saying, the whole thing is that, it goes inside you and it stays inside you. And you're like, I got to tell people about this thing. And that's when it came to me that if she's gone through that and she's rich and she went through this, there must be so many people who are also like her. And what happens to them? And you have to remember, this is at that time when so many bureaucrats were in jail, so many ministers were in jail. And so it was that simple an idea. that, let me contact them. Let me see all of what all of them are up to. And let me see if I can do it. And it just so happened that I pitched it to someone who used to work with me at the Indian Express, who's now a publisher. And you won't believe, the first person that I pitched it to, she was like, yeah, but there are so many prison stories. So I didn't do it. It was Priya of Rolly Books who called me, and she was in Germany. And she called me and she said, stop it. Don't talk to anyone else. I'm going to publish this book with you. So I think it's her credit as well that she saw that. So that's how the first book happened. And you're very right, because it was me interviewing all these people. So the story of Behind Bars is also my sensibilities. So when I meet a woman who is, who I'm a married woman, she's a married woman, but she's married to a terrorist, and she's never spent, lived with him properly after marriage. He's always been in jail. So that brings my perspective into what it must be like for her to be in jail, and then even now dedicate her life to defending someone or fighting for someone who is condemned to death, right? So it was totally my engagement with those 13 people who formed Behind Bars. Now, what happened was, so that book came out and it did well and people liked it. And of course, the nice thing is that everyone else, and it fascinates me even now to hear all of you, and you're all law students, lawyers, you're all lawyers, and you're surprised as well. So imagine how the common person is surprised as well. And that's all, so I feel really validated, because I feel that, okay, I wanted to tell people about this world, and I'm glad that I've been able to throw light on this world, because I can't believe that more people didn't do it before that. But you see, what happens with a reporter is you do that book and you don't want to be typecast into a jail expert or anything. I just tell good stories. I'm not trying to make myself a jail expert. I'm just trying to tell stories. And so what happened was, in the third book, Black Warrant, which, by the way, has done better than any of my books, and has, some people have said that Behind Bars was better. I don't know. I'd love to hear what you all think. But most people, it sold much more. Black Warrant has sold much more. And what happened was, Sunil Gupta, he came in touch with my publisher, and she got in touch with me. She said, you have to tell his story. And I was like, no, I've done that. Get a fresh perspective. And I was like, no, I can't be the person who just tells Tihar stories. And I was tired. This was 2017, my book came out. I think he got back in touch with me in the very same year or the next year, I think 2018. And I just didn't want to, it's so much work writing a book. And, I have a full-time job, and I have a son. He was very young when I did, he was just born by the time Breaking News came out. When I wrote Black Warrant, he was 7, Behind Bars, he was 7, but he's still young. And I like spending time with him. So I was like, I don't want to do this. But she kept saying it. And my husband, he said, he's a great supporter as well of my writing. He's an editor, so he gets people to write. So he was like, no, you should do it. And I think it was then that, he told me the story about, Sunil Gupta told me the story about being there when Afzal Guru, which was there in my first book, you read it, it was there. But I just think that the fact that he admitted at that time that, he was in the room and he played a major role in it. This whole business of going to the ministry. So, being with the minister and all of that, and how they gave the go ahead for Afzal Guru's thing. It was fascinating. So there was a story there. And so they all convinced me, and I'm so glad they did. But it was so difficult, because how does, how does someone like me get into this retired from Haryana jail service officer's mind? Because it can't be Sunetra's voice. And I'm so glad, because because I wrote the entire thing, right? Like, he would just give interviews and I wrote the entire thing. And nobody thinks that. They all tell him, what simple language you used, we love your language. I'm so glad that everyone was convinced that he wrote it. He sat and wrote it. So I was able to get inside his head and tell his story. So I think that part of it was successful, and I'm really happy because I think I knew from the word go. If you notice in this in Black Warrant, I don't even give there's not even a dedication in that book. It's his story. It is Sunil Gupta's story. I just made it come alive, and we're very aware of that. I'm really happy I've been successful in doing that. But it was also good for me because I learned a new skill. My new skill was that how to tell somebody else's story instead of just reporting yourself, how to give that. So yeah, it was progression in that sense.
Yeah, I mean, we had no idea that you were writing it. Even we were a little confused as to how a ghostwriter works and how that part.
It's not a ghostwriter. A ghostwriter is someone who doesn't get any credit for it. It says here Sunil Gupta and Sunetra Choudhury. So it's, so he obviously, yeah.
Okay. One thing that I wanted to ask, because you mentioned that you have had 17 years of experience in journalism, and we all know.
Now 21, yeah.
Yeah. Then you had 20.
Yeah.
Then you had 17, and now you have 21. And we have all seen you on television. Something that I wanted to ask, that's something that we are taught in journalism schools, etc., is to like write informative, write inverted pyramid style, write reverse Bollywood style, etc. Something I noticed in the book is that you have sort of transcended that idea. You have kept the brevity and the clarity part of journalism, but you have brought in the creative non-fiction part into the writing in terms of how you explain the scenery, in terms of how you explain the atmosphere within the jail, or just the person as it is. I mean, the description is like beautiful. So how did you do that? Was there any, was it difficult for you to come up with that language, or was it easy, or was it falling into too much clarity or too much brevity, if there is something like that?
No, I know what you mean. So what I did was that, basically just keep interviewing people about what was it like. Like, for example, I'll give you an example, right? So the toughest bit was Sunil Gupta is a man of few words. Okay, so he'd just be like, "Wo hua, fir unhone unko phansi laga di." Now, just think about it, right? As a writer, I know that for anyone to, as a writer, I know that none of us are ever going to be in a room where someone is being hanged, right? None of us are going to be. I don't think. I mean, it's very unlikely that we are going to be in a room where someone's being hanged. Now, so for that kind of a horror scene, I have to create it for my readers. And the only way I can do it is by going into the details. So for example, so what I did was, first, there were two levels to it. So one, extensive interviews of him and just ask him. But before that, I also did my own research. So there are law commission books, which tell you that, how to go about it, how to do it, how to prepare the rope, how long should it be. So, and that's where my lawyer friends came in handy. There are people who specialize in all of this. And so they told me where to look. And they sent me a lot of material as well to read up. So I did that. And then I asked, because I had that knowledge. So then I asked, so if you read the law commission reports, they say, and the ones that say that you shouldn't have death penalty, it says that, people's bowels empty out when they're being hanged, right? And so I had to ask Sunil Gupta, well, what did it smell like in there? Because they said that, people soil themselves, the excreta comes out, your shit, your urine, everything comes out, because, I mean, it's a horror of an experience. And so, that's when he was like, yes, it does smell back there. It does smell like a toilet there, So I had to ask him to recreate the scene for me. And it also helped to kind of read up on the background to do that. So yes, in order to do that, you can't just rely on interviews. You do your own research so you know what to look for. Because he wasn't telling me this. I think his mind, because had blanked out a lot of things because it was such a horror show. Then, for example, I said to him that, do you think, Sunil ji, do you think the reason why people put that black cloth, right? We know they put a black cloth. So I said, is it because, the tongue comes out and it's too ugly? And he was like, maybe, yeah. Because I had read the reports which said that's what happens to your body. Your neck breaks. The way that you are hanged is, death by hanging is basically, and the most skilled of hangmen know how to do it, that immediately as you think, your neck breaks and you die. But in the process, your entire bowels empty out and, your tongue perhaps comes out. So all of these details, I needed him to describe to me. And so we together kind of make sense of it. And my whole purpose wasn't being like, okay, let me just describe it, because it was just to recreate for people what it must be like. And I thought that because it was from his perspective, the book, it had to have details, because why else is someone telling their story if they're not describing to people? He was there, right? He was there, which none of us can be there. So he has to tell us more about that. So, that's how the voices came in, that I was able to interview him on that. And then he very nicely kind of went back on that, and he would keep sending me voice notes and I would keep reading them. And that's how we did it.
Yeah. So in the beginning of Black Warrant, you also write that while the story is Sunil Gupta's, it's tempered by Sunetra Choudhury's writing and voice. So can you tell us instances of what scenarios where were his stories tempered by, say, your idea of this is how it should be portrayed, or this is how it should come out in the book?
Yeah, you're right. Okay, there are that's a really good story. Let me think about that. So for example, all the torture bits, right? So I don't think that Sunil Gupta wanted us to put in the fact that, he also hit people now and then, right? And so that was tempered by Sunetra, because I basically had to, and he was a great sport that way. I said, look, nobody wants to read a book about I did everything right, I'm the perfect man. Okay, you will only believe and feel with that person if he shows that he's a human being who made mistakes, who did what the others did, who shows his weaknesses, and so I love the bit when he admits to the fact that he taught this guy a lesson because he was being bossy with him. You remember that part where he goes into this, Sunil Grover, I think, they go into the courtroom together, and that he sits in front and he's like, why are you sitting in front? So when they come back, he gets him beaten up, and I love that bit because that's the reality. That's how people, the jailers, show their strength and power, by bossing people over, by getting them beaten up. And so that was my attempt. But he okayed it. He could have said no, which is why I think this kind of book with a politician is not going to work. I would love to write the memoir of a politician, but they're so conscious about their image that they probably wouldn't agree. Whereas in this case, Sunil Gupta agreed, because I convinced him that, look, you can't have this perfect image. You have to admit to the fact that, you meet people as well. You hit someone, and so, yeah, so those were the bits perhaps that stand out for me.
Yeah, and actually quite pertinently, as you're saying that the instances where he accepts that he also was hitting a prisoner to establish his superiority, also that people respect him in prison. And that's also something which also brings out a very human angle to the thing, and also a very true angle, was I don't think any of us found that to be out of the ordinary. I think everyone understood that, okay, this is something which would end up happening when you're dealing when you're in a prison and when you want people to listen to you. So so I think that that tempered bit also has added a lot to the book in terms of bringing out a complete
well
picture
it was a natural part, because it wasn't, it was, the fact is that we were both writing the story, so so it had to be a thing of because otherwise his idea of what would be a, I mean, the good thing is that he accepted the fact that I'm a good journalist. I mean, you have to trust the person, right? So when I say I'm a good journalist, I mean, not in that sense, but in the sense that I know what is a good story. I know which are the bits to focus on, I know basically what makes a great story. I know that. I don't know if I can write that as well as I'd like to, but I know what makes a great story. And so he trusted that. So I can, for example, Umang, if you tell me your life and if you want to be written into a book, I could tell you what to begin with, because that's my skill. I say, okay, this is our opening chapter and this is our ending chapter and this is how we structure it. That's my skill. And I think he accepted that, so in everything. So for example, this whole thing of, he wanted to tell me a lot that Charles Sobraj corrupted everyone but him. But I don't want to put that much of it in. I mean, why should we say, oh, I was totally honest? People don't like that. People are going to be like, I don't know, you're writing that because it's about you. So we just left that. And, he knows that. And Charles Sobraj knows that. And we're not saying anything. And so I didn't say, even though it was his book, but he kept saying to me that, if you look at it, that, I'm the only one. What I have is the fact that I stayed true to myself. I was honest. Of course, you're honest, which is why we are writing this book with you. But I think if you write that I was so honest, immediately people are like, why is that person saying that? Do you know what I mean? So as a writer, I kind of took all of that away as well. I hope he's not upset about that, but I took that all away because I believe as just as a journalist that you don't have to say it. It sounds pompous and righteous to say things like, this is what I did good and this is whatever. People don't want to hear that. People just want to hear the stories and let them decide. And that's what we tried to do with the book. And I think that's what made it work.
Yeah. In fact, like what you're saying, the exact same thing. So the last time we had a discussion we had with like an international lawyer and an author, Philip Sands. So that's the exact same thing he said, that you have to make the reader feel intelligent and you have to leave like breadcrumbs around the book. And so that like when you finally tell them the climax, they are like, oh, I knew this all along. So I think
But that kind of skill is much more for people who are writing fiction. It's much easier for me because I'm just telling a thing which is already there, I just have to choose the details which I think that people didn't know or would like to know, or which I like, and fill that in. You see, because everything is such an editing, isn't it? Right? It's like he would tell a lot of things about random gangsters, and maybe they're fascinating people, but I just didn't think they were that exciting. So I didn't write that much about those random gangsters who I haven't heard of. And I picked the people that, kind of made sense to me. And there were lots of people that he didn't know. So I learned, you said that, when does Sunetra Choudhury come in? It comes into the fact that, the parts, the stories of people and what happens inside them, which he didn't know, who are, for example, we mentioned what happened to the guy who's a Nithari killer, what happens to him, what he went through. So for that, I just did my own research and put all of that in because it fits in there. I wanted the people who read this book not just to know about Sunil Gupta's life, because it's not just about Sunil Gupta's story. It's also a story about people who are being hanged. And how can you tell that story without talking about the people who are on death row and what they go through? So those people who Sunil Gupta didn't know about, I did my own research, I did my own background, and I put that in so that people get more, when they read the book, it's not just one person's story. It has to be a story which interests everyone, which becomes universal. Otherwise, it would just be so easy. I would just take down a story and write it up. And that's not what it is. It's about filling in the details, which I thought was my job.
Yeah. And also, like, while writing the book, at any point, did you feel that you were getting like numb to this entire idea of like how bad the criminal justice system is? Or because like you were just like constantly day in and day out, like reading about these things, that how like injustices are there all around. So like, how do you deal with that idea and what kind of impact did it have on you while writing the book?
I don't think you can ever be numb to it. Do I know that, do I know that things are really bad? Of course I know that. But every time I hear an individual story, it still moves me. I mean, I read about Stan Swami now, and I can't believe, and it's Kobad Gandhi yet again, right? You guys have read Kobad's story and mine. Kobad has his own book now. But it's insane. I mean, the fact that it's going on, happening day in, day out to senior citizens in jail. Can you just imagine it? Can you just imagine why would someone who's that old be a threat? And to read about, I hope, the fact that the whole Kobad Gandhi chapter in my book just tells people how horrendous the experience can be. If someone wants to mess with you when you're in prison, they can make your life hell. I mean, and everyone says that's hell. Nowadays, us being locked up at home is supposed to be hell. But it really is. I mean, the people who were speaking to me for behind bars, that the Malayali guy, he basically told me he paid 50,000 rupees. He said because he couldn't take the smell of feces, because his head would be next to the drain. And he said he couldn't take it anymore. He said, I wanted to kill myself, being like that. And so that's why I got my parents to pay the bribe of 50,000 rupees, So even though I'd spent my career knowing this happens, but just meeting that person and hearing a story, it does take away your sleep for those few days, and it stays with you. I think all of these people are going to stay with me for life. And, but it just, I think the numb part is that, oh my God, okay, so what is the difference that behind bars or Black Warrant? Did it change anything at all? I don't know. Sadly, no. Stan Swami still can't get a straw in jail, so that's the problem.
And that's absolutely true. I think Dr. Kafil Khan also, when he was in prison, he had a letter and he wrote that people, for per 100 people, we have one toilet or one place to go. And even now, like what's happening with Sudha Bhardwaj, what's happening with Stan Swami, what happened with Barbara Rao before he was released on bail, is something that just proved that there are more stories, more narratives, but it's really not changing or reforming anything. Since you have spoken about the miseries in prison, I would like to ask you, in the light of COVID, because you are always on the ground, and prisons are overcrowded, and it's there in the prison reform report, it's there everywhere, we all know it. So I mean,
sorry, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry,
no, yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, so I was saying that the prisons are overcrowded. Amidst COVID, the court has directed that some people should be relieved on parole or bail. Do you think that prisoners are often neglected just because, by the fact of being prisoners, that their rights are not there? And what do you think this condition is now, right now, amidst COVID? Like, since you are on the ground, I think you'll know it better than any of us.
No, I think, the whole thing about COVID, which I've been reading up, is just the fact that across the world, there's been such a movement of decongesting jails, right? And we've also had so many judgments as well, which said that you have to make sure that arrest has to be the last resort. There are so many judgments. So it's not that people aren't aware that this is a problem. And we've seen basically congested jails, and our prisons are overcrowded. Tihar, I think, is not just double, has 3 times the number of people that it's supposed to have. So the fact that they shouldn't be there, and if you read my book, then it shows that how a lot of the people who are in there are basically people who are poor. People who can't afford 500, 1,000 rupees of bail money. So tell me, if someone is a petty thief and they're just there, they've been forgotten, nobody cares about them, what is it the state is achieving by keeping them there? And we have, because of COVID, they should all be freed. but I think the only number of people that they freed is 3,000. And then I read the report as well, the fact that they wanted them to be taken back, that the parole should end and they should come back. Now, this was such a golden opportunity to look at rationalizing who is in jail, who is not. But you know, the thing is, and I think that someone like S.Y. Qureshi, former Chief Election Commissioner, he said this. He said, we will not have proper conditions in jail till the time we don't give the people in jail a vote. The fact that they are unable to vote, if you're in jail, you're unable to vote, that is perhaps the reason that no one cares what conditions there are in jail. In theory, we have excellent suggestions, like you have a judge who's going to visit every month or every week, magistrates visiting, you can tell, but in practice, very rarely do you have a judge who actually goes and does a proper survey of what's the condition like. It's only once or twice, remember, and it hit major headlines that they went in and they saw that the Chandra brothers, Unitech brothers, that they were actually enjoying themselves in jail, only because a judge decided to do his job. So it means that the rest of the time, they weren't doing their jobs. And I really think that there is a popular opinion that people who go to jail deserve to go in jail. So, you know, all of this thing about prisoners' rights, all of this thing about, there should be, it should be sanitary conditions inside the jail. There should be hygiene there. That's only people who are so-called liberals have. Whereas I think every civilized person should have those, should believe that even if you are an accused, even if you're a convict, you've done something wrong, we believe, and our constitution, our law believes in reform. So we should give that person dignity of life. But unfortunately, the person on the street doesn't believe that. They believe they should be tortured, they should be beaten up, they should be treated like animals or whatever. They don't care how they're treated. So that's the sad part. That is the sad part, which is why you have each and every authority in jail, each of those jailers. I think both my books kind of show that they're authorities in themselves. No one tells them to do anything till the time there isn't a death in custody. And I think the latest figure shows that deaths in custody have also been increasing. I don't see anyone concerned about that. So yes, the whole COVID situation is that we should be using the opportunity to, decongest our jails to reduce the crowds, but I don't think that's being done at all. If even during COVID, they're being so upset, they're so upset about the fact that an 80-year-old person is wanting bail, then I don't understand, how they're going to see sense about this.
Yeah. So in these kind of situations, while like what you mentioned, one thing, giving votes to prisoners is like one suggestion. But like, what is your idea about like humanizing like these like quote unquote criminals? Because like I think both your books focus like largely on like bringing the human aspect to them. Like we are just discussing about this earlier, how like from the outside world, like all the antagonists which are there are protagonists in each of your chapter. And like in like one thing which like I remember in the like the Tandoor murder case where
Sushil Sharma.
Yeah, Sushil Sharma, where like from the like to the outside world he's a cold-blooded killer, but somebody who spoke to inside prison said that he's a very nice person. So so like what's
and
your
I met him. He is a nice person.
Yeah. But like when you like see their portrayal in the media or like how people talk about them, so like I think it's always trying to like distance people who are criminals and viewing them as somebody not human. So I think in those aspects, like books like these are like become very important, and like I think there have been more conversations also in terms of like movies or books which are coming out. So what is your take on this entire idea about like how like is there a need to first like humanize criminals or people in prison, and like generally where do you see this going? You think that it's becoming better in present day given that there's slightly more conversation about it maybe, or you think it's getting worse?
I don't think it's getting worse. I think that, I don't know. The thing is that that's what I was saying in the previous answer as well, that I think that people are just so, I think that I think people have their own problems, and they don't mean to, but they can't be, they can't fight for a larger good. And this is one of the, kind of markers of a civilized society, where we care for the rights of the underprivileged and the ones who are incarcerated, and that we, there is a degree of empathy in dealing with everyone. Unfortunately, while the books do have it, like, what was amazing was for me to go through the jail manuals, and the jail manuals actually have, they have decent food. It says that, you have to give that much milk, that much ghee, that much fruits, that much vegetable. So on paper, we are civilized. What does happen is that corruption in the system. And they're so badly paid. And I think that the second book, Black Warrant, shows the fact, Sunil Gupta shows the fact that, the prison officials who are looking after them, they're so deprived themselves. They get bad money, they're unhappy, they're not mental health experts. Now, if you had mental health experts as prison officials, then immediately you would be humanizing them, right? Because immediately you'd see each of them as a story and as a human being with their own story, who made a mistake and is now here for reform, and you would try to help that. But if you have people who are semi-cops, who are frustrated because they wanted to be police officials, but they ended up here as some prison official who gets paid less than a police officer, then obviously he's going to take out his frustration on the people who can't fight back, right? And that's where the process of dehumanization begins. I think it becomes very clear from Sunil Gupta's story. And, do you remember that joke that Sunil Gupta tells in the book? I thought it was so telling, and he says that there's a joke that people love to tell each other, that once this guy, I'm reminding all of you, he says that God comes and asks the prison official, what would you like? Anything you want, you can have. But just remember, the condition is whatever you get, your neighbor's going to get double that. And he said, blind me in one eye. And he said that joke was very popular among all the prison officials. So can you imagine the darkness in their hearts? And you talked about empathy and humanizing, they themselves are dehumanized, right? So obviously the need is to have mental health officials all over the place. I think prison officials need to be trained in mental health, and that's the only way to do it. I'm not saying they aren't there. There are lots of police officials who are being trained now then as well, but they're just not enough. You need people who are trained, who are mental health officials, who are happy in their jobs, to be treating other people in a manner that is full of dignity and which makes them, brings joy to their hearts. Otherwise, it's going to be a place that really is hell on earth. And I think most prisons in India are there, except the southern ones. So I think, like, instead of me speaking in these kind of ideal situation, I think people would do well to go and see what is happening. As lawyers, if you are interested in reform, go and see what's happening in Telangana jails, because Kobad Gandhi has just come out of the jail. So it's a new story. And he talks about the fact that he was very happy in Telangana jail, in Hyderabad's Chellapalli jail. And I went and visited him there as well. And he talks about the fact that they had completely divided the places where people were put. So he was a political prisoner, so he could move around, and he had a garden in front, and he loved the trees there, and he could do yoga, and there was really good food. There was local hot food. So, these simple things make the prisoners very happy and focus on reform, instead of thinking that they're basically going to die and then they have to do some kind of corrupt practice to make their life okay inside the jail. So I think the practical answer would be, Umang, that people should see what Chellapalli jail in Telangana is doing and maybe try and copy that and bring it to Tihar or wherever else.
Yeah, he's written about this in his book also,
Yeah.
Fractured Freedoms. Yeah,
That's right. Yeah.
Since you spoke about society,
Sorry, I just want to know, the questions keep popping up on the screen. You guys are looking at them, right?
yeah. So we're intertwining
Okay.
our questions
cool.
and the questions here and asking.
Okay, cool. Thanks. Yeah.
You were talking about society, and you said that society has to view them in the way that they're humanized. But since you're part of the media industry, and we all know what it is popular for, and Arushi has happened before, Arushi case and Nirbhaya case has happened, and the idea is to always show the criminalized as the person who is, the person who has committed the criminal, or maybe the accused hasn't been, convicted as yet, as the antagonist, like Umang said. And so, do you think that in this sensationalization, they dehumanize the person first, like Afzal Guru was? And how, it's in the book, it's written that he was not that kind of a person. He was very quiet and he was very nice and he knew Urdu, etc. So, while your book is humanizing it, you're part of the media industry, the very industry which is trying to dehumanize it. So, what do you think about that dichotomy? I mean, uh,
No, I get what you're saying. In fact, in the Wahid chapter in Behind Bars, I talk about this. I talk about the fact that we are complicit because with what happened. Because, Wahid asked me a really simple question. He said, the reason why I spent 10 years in jail, even though I was innocent and I was finally called innocent, is because you guys didn't ask, as media people, you didn't ask a basic question. And I was like, what? And he was like, which terrorist in the world plants a bomb, waits for it to explode, goes back to his house and stays there with his family? And then, not just that, also keeps coming for questioning, right? And is then arrested a few days later. He said, which terrorist does that? And I was like, oh my God. But the thing is, so that's completely right, that we are complicit, because what happens is that, as I told you, I covered crime right in the beginning for a couple of months, and that was it. But I've seen crime coverage in India and things like that. The problem is that most reporters go by what the police is saying, because you see, initially what they'll do is they will not even tell you the names, or if they tell you the names, they will not say wherever. So the simplest things that we can do is immediately take the police thing. Usually, what happens in these things is you just hear the police, right? So you just hear the police say, today we've arrested so and so from that place, and he is the person who's behind this murder, or he's the person who's behind this terror attack. And that's it. They sometimes, most of the time, they don't give you the address. So it requires a lot of effort on the said reporter's part to go do their homework, to find out who this person is, then go and speak to the family, and then tally their facts, right? Now, initially, so this tallying, comparing notes with what the police said, with what the family says, and then doing your own bit of digging around, that takes time. So a lot of the people, especially with television, who are doing immediate stories, they just go for what the police is saying, So what I would say is, yes, the media is completely, a lot at fault over here, because they take all this information and they regurgitate it, and it shouldn't be like that. But I think that people, because they now realize how much, the kind of wrong facts. So for example, when was the media not buying this anymore? Do you remember the Hyderabad killing of the rape accused? So media didn't buy the police version, right? They said that this is ridiculous. But you can't say ridiculous, because activists can say that. Our job is also to back it up, to find facts to counter it. So we are trying. So you say it by saying that, okay, fine. They said that while they were, they were trying to escape, and that's when they were hit. And then you counter it by saying, but the autopsy report says that it was they were shot point blank and not from the back. But that is assuming that you get a copy of the autopsy report out. You see, there are challenges for the media at every level. So the good guys, the good reporters are really trying. But a lot of times there's an absence of any kind of information. So as I said to you, then where do you get it from? You get it from the family of the accused, right? But in many of these cases, the family was told, don't you speak to the media, otherwise you're going to be in trouble. So they don't speak, only the police speak. And so you are left with very little. So then somebody has to tell you that, these are the holes. But you get those holes only if the autopsy report, which also takes time, and they try and suppress. So yes, the media is complicit, but they're not always fully at fault, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. And so like a question tied to this is how do you see the role of lawyers in this? Because I think like media is still like one body which is like criticized or or applauded also for the kind of work they do. But I think for lawyers, the thing is they always hide behind this idea of like the cab rank rule, or like a lawyer is always distant.
What's the cab rank rule? Sorry, I don't know.
That whoever comes to a lawyer, the lawyer has to present the best case forward for them, irrespective of like whether they are criminal or what the lawyer believes that the person must have done. So therefore, like always, so while that has like on principle, I think that's good also, but practically we see it having a lot of problems as well. So so where do you see exactly the role of lawyers in this? Because somewhere like I personally feel as like somebody who's trained as a lawyer, that lawyers don't get, I think, much flack for the problem with the justice system.
Yeah,
it's always like
well, now they are getting, and rightly so, right? I mean, we're seeing the lawyers and what the kind of representations they make in court, especially in Supreme Court. I think the scrutiny increases when you're over there as well. It's just that people are afraid to say honest things about senior lawyers who are very influential, because the whole thing about defamation laws, and reporters being afraid of being harassed for them and things like that. But I think what they could do is, I think all of you as lawyers should identify journalists who you think are honest and who you can trust. I think, as I told you, I wouldn't be, none of these books would have been possible without my lawyer friends, honestly. And I think it depends on, I think to each his own, but basically, a lot of lawyers are activists, right? So even if they're with the wrong side, they'll find a way to help the right side. And even if they don't, a lot of people are very, very professional, and everyone understands that. I think professionalism is something that everyone respects, everyone goes with. But I think that all of you should really identify young journalists who you can talk to, because a lot of people may not be accessible. So there could be reporters who you trust, who are hanging around the courtroom, who are passionate, who are passionate in telling stories. So find people that you match with. So if you are a bit of an activist lawyer, find journalists who are also kind of passionate about stories, telling stories, and you will know who does it for whatever. Everyone figures out who is what, Some reporters do it just for their byline, some do it because they're activists, some do it because, it's a great story. So everyone should find those people who are willing to tell their story and befriend them. And that helps, and that helps. And I think, because I think especially for people who are, doing criminal cases, or who are doing these kind of cases, it's much more about appearing in these, because it's so problematic and it takes so much of your time that you obviously have to be passionate about it. So if you find journalists who are like that, maybe they can help you in humanizing your. So, for example, a lot of people would tell me that, there's this person and, I'm not taking their case, but maybe you can just tell their story. So that always helps. Even if they're not fighting their case, they can put they can definitely tell journalists about a particular person's story. So yeah.
Yeah, and just as an observation, I think telling these stories also help a lot. I think your book also was cited, in the Supreme Court or the High Court.
Yeah.
I don't remember which one, but I think about like Ram Singh's
Yeah.
murder, and so yeah, I think like these are small bits which hopefully will bring some change. So so yeah, like both Sonali and I have lots of questions. There are lots of questions in the Q&A box also. So we'd like to ask you like how much time you'd have so we can like temper it accordingly.
I can take a couple of questions more. Yeah.
Okay, sure. So, so there's one question which Rohan asks, that how do researchers and journalists negotiate with objective facts while engaging with subjective human experiences? And how have you managed to like balance your emotions with rationality in your professional career?
Uh, um, like I mean, is there any particular point that they are talking about? I mean, in the sense that, as I say, I've been doing it for a long time. So maybe for a younger person, it would be difficult. But for me, I find whenever something really upsets me as well, like I said, the whole idea of the book came about because I couldn't keep it inside. So I process by writing. So, and facts are sacrosanct. I mean, you can't be. So I know that, I think you said that, that your books also have creative freedom. Yes, but they're not with the facts. They're creative in the sense that in the way I would write, I would describe it or whatever, I would describe and I would obviously be creative with the dialogue, but it would be factual. This is what they said, so they would have spoken in Hindi. So I will write it in English, the dialogue. So that's creative, but it has to be 100% factual. In fact, I'll tell you this, that for example, I did my background. I mean, I knew Sunil Gupta for a long time, but I did a kind of background check on him with the Delhi government because he reports to the Delhi government. And I didn't want to be telling the story of someone whose integrity was, or maybe he was telling the truth or not. That was a huge fear for me. What if he's making up these stories? So I spoke to the people who would be making his ACRs. I spoke to the Delhi government because that's where he reports, and they said no, he has a clean record. And yeah, but I did my own thing because facts, you can't have someone saying no, you just made that up. So it has to be truthful. And sometimes I think that where I do disagree with people is that, sometimes people think that no, I shouldn't say that because, that will upset a lot of people. Now, I don't care about that. I really don't believe in censoring things. I don't believe that, you don't write that because it will be traumatic. No, if this is what happened, then we have to write that. If Wahid's Wahid was threatened, or the other people accused with him were threatened by saying that we are going to rape your sister and your mother if you don't confess, I am going to put that, so it is traumatic, but it has to be told because that's what happened to them. I think it's time that we all came to terms with the reality that is happening in our justice system.
So the next question is by Gurveer. They're asking that how do you approach the authorities to grant permission for like interviewing under trial prisoners? Because the DGP of the prison has been denying permission, and the High Court also has advised to go to the court, which is hearing the case for the under trial.
So it's very difficult. It's very difficult. I think that the person who you have to interview has to agree and has to register you as a family member. So when I went to see Kobart, I went with the lawyers, his lawyer. And that's how it happened. They have to give you time. You have to go into the family. And that's with Peter Mukherjee, it was only through letters. But with anyone you go to see in jail, it has to be with their permission and through their lawyers. They have to agree to see you because the police, the jail authorities ever since the entire thing about the, the December 2000, the BBC documentary, since the BBC documentary became an international scandal for the government, they've denied permission to anyone to go and shoot or interview people in jail. So it's become very difficult. You have to either, and sometimes I think with the NGOs you can go with, but that one has to figure out.
Yeah, also, there's one question which like all of us had that, so like whoever's a guest on the show, we always ask them for like books, movies, TV recommendations, things which have had an impact on them and like made them who they are. So like in that regard, what would be like the books or like anything, like any piece of like culture which comes to mind?
Oh, lots. So as a journalist, I would really, and if you all want to write about, especially what you're seeing, and, it dealt with a case, Tom Wolfe's books are amazing. I really, his book, New Journalism, I feel was a huge influence on me. And his book, Bonfire of Vanities, tells the story of a particular case and trial involving a Black man in America and what it was all about. So, and that's a perfect thing for all of you to read as well, because it just recreates the trial and how to then go about. And I really hope that many of you do write, because my God, the amazing stories that you all must have. So that's something to, I picked up Ram Jethmalani's book recently, and I was so disappointed. I mean, I couldn't read it because it was basically, his columns and whatever. And I really wish he would have told the story of the people that he meets and, what happened, because he was, I met him to get an endorsement for my book, and he was lovely and he was really kind, and, and we all know him as kind of like out there and, being daring and taking a position. He took a position in Afzal case as well. He takes these positions. And I wish he had time to also tell all book about, everything, the behind the scenes of all his cases. So that would have been amazing. So he didn't do that. I really hope all of you do that as well. So yes, Tom Wolfe would be fantastic. I think the fact that, I think you talked about it, why is there so much interest now in crime? It's because of all these streaming services, right? Everybody realizes, like I was telling you, that's what attracted me as a young reporter, to have all these crime series, crime stories. So everybody wants now to make a film out of it. So that's really, so watching that. So I thought Delhi Crimes was completely one-sided, but still it's good to watch. They're saying, I'm in talks, they're probably making a series perhaps out of Black Warrant. Vikramaditya Motwane, he has acquired the rights for it. We don't know if it's going to be made or not, but anyway, he's got the rights for it. So let's see what happens. But yeah, so all of these true crime series, they're great to watch. So I enjoy that as well. But I just want more of this out of India, I would like, for example, the Arushi book was very good. It's called Arushi as well. It's by Aviruk Sen. It was a good book because it basically, even though some people felt it was a little biased, but it really, just by describing the court scenario, it made it very clear how our justice system fails us, So yeah, these are some of the things that I would mention. Any final question?
Yeah, and there are two questions. Just won't take a lot of your time.
No, sure.
So since Pride Month is next month, although India celebrates it in November also, this is regarding the Khushi
yes.
Khushi chapter, where you compared her story with sort of Bhavri Devi's story. In this chapter, you have written that while taking to the police station, the men, the person who was writing the report, the constable, manhandled them, and there was no like woman constable, and it was not even required because it's the third gender. So, there was no law as such by then. But now we have a law, Transgender Act, we have it. It has its own issues, but at least the government is understanding that, okay, there is a third gender, although they are not looking at people across all spectrums in India. So do you think anything has changed since then in terms of reporting these cases about
No, I don't.
and also like how the police authority views the transgender person?
Unfortunately, not. You said it right when you said that, there are so many issues with the new law as well. The fact that the self-determination is still not there, the fact that, you have another authority, it's just so demeaning for the community. And I think recently, I think in the last few months, there was another case, wasn't there, of a murder of um, a hijra in Telangana, I think. And I think the really upsetting aspect to me, which I think still goes, because it's not that long ago, is the POCL report, which said that if you're a third gender and if you're ending up in jail, and many of them end up in jail, that you will get raped. I mean, it's insane. It's insane that even December 2012 hasn't met anything for people who are, trans people. And it's really, really upsetting. And I don't know, it's very scary. It's very scary what could be happening in our jail. So really, I just wish, if there's anything, the MHA invited me for a seminar on prison reform, because there was this lovely officer in the Bureau of Police Research and Development called Vijay Kumar. He's now posted in Tamil Nadu. And he had invited me because he had read the book. There are not many people in policy making in the government who are, reading current literature and stuff. And that's one of the things that I said, that you have to take care of the trans community, because the big problem is, which cell are they going to keep them in? And they would keep them in the male cell, then they're going to be raped, right? And I don't think that they would put them in the women's cell. So in some places where they are good, and they are, they put them in a separate place, which is completely away from the other regular jails. But the thought that that they would do this to that figure, that POCL report, which said that most of them get raped in jail, is just, I think, traumatic.
Thank you for answering that, and thank you for recommending that also. I mean, it's high time we have something like that for all spectrums and everybody on the spectrum. Something that everyone is questioning right now is people who want to write a book. And if you have any tips you could share with.
Yeah, there are also people who said that specifically they want to write about like women prisoners or like mental health of prisoners. And also people asking like, what are the problems that you face generally? It's like any like tips which you would have for people.
So let me tell you all together. So one, as I said, it has to be something which keeps you up at night, really. I mean, if you are not obsessed with it, no one else will be interested. So it has to be something you're literally thinking about day and night. That has to be the topic of your book. Second, it has to be something you know well, or you get to know well. So, your research. So either the person you get to know really well. I think it becomes really obvious when a book is superficial, and then it's not worth it. So don't waste your time. Don't waste other people's time. Don't waste your time. Third, I think that, especially when someone says, I want to write a book on mental health, or make sure it's about the people. So it can't be like, okay, suicide in jails, and then you give a whole lot of statistics and whatever. That all goes over people's heads, Just tell stories about people. And the stories which stick with us are the ones that are about individuals, good-looking people, cute kids, women whose stories are breaking your hearts. So find some peg which hooks you, or say about something that stands out for you. So for example, one thing that I really feel bad about is the fact that, I know that Dalits are they are mistreated in jails as well. But I called up Besvera Wilson, I called up so many activists saying that, do you know of anyone, any Dalit who has been in jail? And I could tell their story about what happens to them, what is the kind of casteism that you face in jails. And I couldn't come up with anyone. So that's my problem, that I just couldn't come up with something like that. But I read this story during my research about this person who was very young, and he was like a minor when he got arrested in Bihar, and he was a Dalit, and he was basically he had taken his his animals out to graze, and they went into an upper caste person's land, and his animals were free there, and because of that he was sent to jail, and he spent 13 years in jail. And those 13 years, the conditions were so bad that he didn't get a place to sleep in jail. He used to sit, jail was so crowded that he used to sit and sleep. So the moving thing to me was that apparently when he was released after 13 years or 15 years, I can't remember, because apparently this happened in the 60s. When he was released, his body was so used to sitting and sleeping that he could never lie down and sleep properly ever again, I mean, how shocking is that? So what I'm trying to just say is that look for stories that shock you and tell those stories, or look for stories that bring hope and tell those stories. So whatever, it could be a happy story, or it could be a heartbreaking story, but it can't be an okay story. It has to be something you've never heard before. It has to be something that blows your mind, because we have a lot of books in the world. We don't need another book. We need another book if it tells a story that hasn't been written. So we have to go out and find that story. And we shouldn't worry about, okay, am I a good writer or not? Because once you found that story and book, which is insane, which blows your mind, then you can find a publisher and they'll get you someone who will help you write. Or you just tell the story and they'll write it down for you. Kanhaiya's story, I believe, was just him just saying in his beautiful way what he says, and someone, transcribed it. But find those stories, which you will if you're in the law, and tell those compelling stories. And to figure out what is a good story, read great books. So yeah, these are my tips. You're muted.
Yeah. So any works in future which you should look out for, because you've written 3 books now, and you're saying Black Warrant might be made into a documentary series or a documentary
web series. Yeah.
So what are any book plans, something coming up which?
So again, I'm just waiting for the time that that I start obsessing about something. I'm sure I will, because I'm a journalist. So that's why I like my job, that I keep hearing stories, but I have nothing planned. So I don't know when. So I have nothing planned. So I'm waiting for a subject matter to hit me and keep me awake at night, and then I'll tell that story. I would like, someone was telling me, will you tell another book? Like, you've written 2 books about jails, are you going to write a third one? No, I don't think so. Unless, and this is something Anuj Bhari said to me, of Bhari Sons in Khan Market. Anuj Bhari said to me, someone said, oh, you've written another book. And he's like, yeah, because she's waiting to tell a love story. So unless I find a love story in jail, I'm not writing another jail book.
That's really nice, and I look forward to that. I think that'll be a unique one, and I hope that it's it's not the conventional boy meet girl, and it's girl meet girl or boy meet boy or something of that sort. Something that we have learned today is also just the way to write, the way you view as a journalist, and also I think I would call you an activist, because you have that trigger, and that the same thing has flowed in the book also, and that passion has come alive. You were right, you're a great editor, you're a great writer, and you're a great storyteller also. And I think you should write fiction if you get stuck on something.
Too much work. Too much work. Too much work. So, but thank you all for having me. It's been a pleasure to interact with people who've read the books, and really a privilege. Thank you.
Yeah, please, everyone, please check out all her books, and she's amazing, and all her stories on HT also. We are also going to have another session with Duke Chaudhary and Mihir Desai on this Sunday. We are talking about Bhima Koregaon case. So if you'd like to, if even you would like to join, then I think you should come.
Thank you. I will. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
And thank you.
Thank you, Mang. Thank you. Bye.